Rider-Waite-Smith or Thoth, the two decks who probably are getting the most hate out of all of the tarot decks in the whole world. Obviously, when you like Rider-Waite-Smith, you hate Thoth, and when you are a Thoth enthusiast, you don't like Rider-Waite-Smith. Now, I know that's not true of everyone, but there is a certain tension between the two camps, right? I'm finally finding the time to study the Thoth, so that's why I was inspired to talk about this, since I am mostly a Rider-Waite-Smith and Marseille-based tarot reader. Now, in that, I'm already breaking the rules here and there. So to some of you listening, it's perhaps sacrilege. But I often find overlap in the traditional meanings of both of those systems, so I combine them sometimes. And to me, that makes sense. Because we are talking about universal archetypes, right? So I understand that different tarot decks come from different sources or backgrounds, but I'm really seeing a sort of overarching energy with archetypes. It's what you read into it, what I think matters. And then there's the Thoth, or Thoth, or Thoth, or whatever. So of course nowadays there are many more systems, and I believe not only nowadays, I think there's always been decks that have their own system, but I'm mostly interested in focusing on the big three in my mind, the Marseille, and then there is Rider-Waite-Smith and Thoth, who both come from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So this is why these two, in themselves very different decks, get compared with each other so often. The Rider-Waite was made by Arthur Edward Waite and drawn by Pamela Coleman Smith, and the Thoth was made by Aleister Crowley and illustrated by Lady Frida Harris. So obviously Waite called his deck Rider-Waite. Rider, I think that was a company that printed his decks, and Waite after himself. And only when Pamela Coleman Smith commemorative set came out, the deck was also named after her, so Rider-Waite became Waite-Smith or Rider-Waite-Smith. Although I do remember seeing, or actually even owned, some of those decks, vintage decks that had her name on the box, but they were always misspelled. So that has changed, fortunately. Crowley made the Book of Thoth and had images illustrated for it. So Thoth is an Egyptian god and was seen as a sort of equivalent of Hermes in Greek mythology. In contrary to many of you, I don't feel an aversion towards the Thoth tarot, because I learned with Rider-Waite-Smith and I'm supposed to not like the Thoth, or if it would have been the other way around, I would have not bothered with the Rider-Waite. You're allowed your opinion, but it's weird seeing two camps sometimes. And I'm admitting I am camp tarot for self-development as opposed to camp fortune-telling, but that to me seems much more important than what deck you use, because we're talking about beliefs and values in that case. I remember watching a video of Cosmic Spirit and Books where she mentioned that this whole camp Rider-Waite versus camp Thoth is a rather new phenomenon. So of course I thought about it, and I think we can't really be sure if that's true because we didn't have the internet, for instance, in those days. And that means that we weren't as widely connected as we are now. But maybe with all that choice out there, we are actually becoming more judgmental or even prejudiced and only care about new imagery. And I know what it's like to just want a new deck that you can immediately read with. Because it's comfortable and fun. But it stops being fun when it's always the same. In my experience of learning a new tarot deck or system, it's that I learn about myself too. And I develop myself too. Which ultimately is the goal. So ask yourself the question, what's the reason you don't like one or the other Golden Dawn system? Because they're both Golden Dawn. Because maybe Rider-Waite appears too simple or not heavy enough, or because Thoth looks like a pain to read, or maybe you're a little scared of it because it looks like it can unlock some uncomfortable messages for you. That's possible. And honestly, it's fine if you don't like Thoth or you don't like the Rider-Waite. As long as it came from yourself and it's not just repeating what you're hearing other people say. Because it's not like you have to choose. You're allowed to delve into both systems. I simply wanted to talk about my relationship with my Thoth, which is growing, because I haven't worked with it nearly as much as I want yet. I was lucky enough to find a first edition Greenie from 1978. Comes in this box. It was printed in Belgium and it was still wrapped in cellophane. It has that black and red unicursal hexagram, which I love, because it's a 6-pointed star that you can draw in the air, of course, but you can draw in one go. It's like without lifting the pen off the paper. It's not supposed to be used in the deck, but wonderful. I'll put that over here. And then I have a little booklet as well. So yeah, there are 2 cards, one blank and one Ordo Templi Orientis card. What it says on here is, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Aleister Crowley designed this tarot as illustrations for the Book of Thoth. They were painted by Lady Frida Harris and are now issued as cards. To use them is to learn. To use them with the delicacy of great art is to embark on the path of initiation. And then some more information. So I thought that was really wonderful. I'm running out of cards. The Thoth deck usually doesn't have these green borders. This is what we now lovingly call Greenie, even though when it came out, apparently it was the icky green cards. Because I think the first edition had white or blue borders, and then the gray came along, and then the green ones were printed somewhere along the way, and then now we're back to gray. But I think this green really warms up the deck, even though there are less colors, I think. Like, how do I explain that? There's less color differences or somehow, but it doesn't matter because it really feels like my deck. And then after finding this one, I actually accidentally found another one, which was a little bit more used and a little bit less green than this one, but still really cool, and I gifted that one to my boyfriend. And look, can you see that they have different hues of green? I think that's really cool. This deck is so luxurious. It's a bit posh, fancy. It's like I have to feel in tune with the desire to do high magic or something, you know, whatever that really is, to read with it. And I'm sure that will change as I get to know it better. A lot of people are intimidated by this deck, which I get because there's a lot of symbolism. But the more I flip through it, get to know it, read with it, the more I see how clear it actually all is. So yes, there's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot to learn about every little bit of symbolism in the cards, because there is a lot, and I knew that. But that's why we have books, right? But I will probably just learn as I go. It's what I've been doing. So I pull cards for myself, I read what I see, and finally pull out a book, or maybe two, to see what everything on its own means. Yeah, because right now I kind of run the risk to read the pip cards as Marseille pips, and I don't think that's fair. On one hand, because my goal is to learn this deck, and also I think, looking at the keywords down here, I think that doesn't always make sense, so I have to learn about it. I think it does make a difference when you get a bigger version of this deck to see all the symbols, because these pictures have a lot in them and they really do come out better in a bigger printing. Right now I'm so interested in the court cards because they look so different from the archetypes that I've been working with so far, and I think that if I get to know them, I'll be fine with this deck. So I think there is a true connection that will come between me and the Thoth tarot. What do you think of all this? Because we are allowed to disagree. But again, those two decks probably get the most hate out of all of the tarot decks in the world. Probably from each other, too. So what's your favorite deck or system, and is there a system that you don't like? And of course then there's the follow-up question, why? Have a good night, everyone.